Now, before anyone gets emotional, I'm not talking vibes, I'm talking data. Actual Federal Reserve SCF economic reports data. Gen X ended up with massive wealth and Gen Z got crumbs. So let's start with the receipts here. According to the Federal Reserve's distributional financial accounts as of 2024, Gen X holds $46 trillion in wealth. That is literally 29% of all US wealth, according to wealthview.com. Gen Z holds less than 1%, about 1.5 trillion, also from the same source. Gen Z is only 20% of the population and owns less than 1% of the wealth. Tell me how that makes any sense. Gen X walked into adulthood when housing was cheap, college was affordable, and wages actually kept up with the cost of living. Gen Z walked into adulthood like, hey, welcome to the economy, rent is 40% of your income, tuition is a mortgage, and healthcare costs more than your car. Good luck, fuck you. The cost of everything exploded after Gen X got in the door. So let's talk about affordability here. The same Federal Reserve-based data shows boomers bought houses at 3 times their income. Gen X bought it at 3.5 times. Millennials, 5.5 times. Gen Z projected even worse. Again, all from wealthview.com. College tuition, boomers 10% of income, Gen X 18%. Millennials 35%. Gen Z, hope you like that. Healthcare, boomers 5% of income, Gen X 8%, millennials 12%, Gen Z, hope you don't get sick. Hope you don't end up like, well, in my case, hope you don't end up diabetic like me in my case, because otherwise I'm screwed, right? Now, of course, Gen X didn't cause all of this alone, but they were the ones in the workforce, voting age, and managerial positions during the decades when these costs skyrocketed. They were the adults in the room, and the room simply caught fire. Gen X had the highest asset accumulation at age 30. The St. Louis Fed's SCF data shows that at age 30, boomers had $135,000 in assets. Millennials had $190,000 in assets. And Gen X had the most, $201,000. Again, this is according to the Federal Reserve. Gen X wasn't struggling the way they pretend. They were stacking assets while Gen Z is stacking basically just coping mechanisms at this point. Gen Z's income is similar, but buys way less. Inflation adjusted income at age 30. Boomers 67,000, Gen X 72,000, Millennials 71,000, Gen Z to be a projected 68,000 to 75,000. So Gen Z isn't making dramatically less. They're just getting economically mugged by the cost of living. Gen X got the last train out of things are affordable and then pulled the ladder up behind them. And Gen Z inherited the debt explosion Gen X lived through. The whole student loan debt thing, total US student debt 1.77 trillion. The explosion happened during Gen X's adulthood, the era when college went from part-time job that can cover it to lifelong indentured servitude. Housing crisis, healthcare inflation, wage stagnation, gig economy replacing stable jobs, all that accelerated during the decades Gen X was rising into leadership roles. Again, not blaming individuals, but blaming the era they presided over absolutely screwed Gen Z. Now, Gen X loves to say that we had it hard too. Yeah, you had it hard, but you also had affordable homes, affordable college, jobs with pensions, and an economy that wasn't a flaming trash can. While, people my generation, Gen Z, have rent that eats half their paycheck, tuition that costs more than a house, healthcare that bankrupts you for breathing wrong, a job market where every listing wants entry-level 5 years experience, and a wealth inequality that looks like a dystopian novel. So yes, Gen X became the new boomers because they're basically doing the same thing the boomers did, pretending the system is fine because it worked for them. They got the last slice of cake, and now they're basically telling Gen Z, well, maybe if you stop buying iced coffee, bro, a latte didn't cost a 78 trillion generational wealth imbalance. A latte didn't make housing 6 times the income. A latte didn't inflate tuition by 300%. Gen Z is not broke because of coffee. They're broke because the economic elevator stopped working after Gen X got to the top floor. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that Gen X didn't mean to become the new boomers, but the data doesn't lie. They benefited from a system that collapsed right after they got theirs, and now Gen Z is left sweeping up the rubble. So those are my 2 cents. Take it for how you will. See you in the next one. Goodbye.